So I hope you all enjoyed last week. Thank you to Ellie, and have had some fun going out looking for slow worms and grass snakes. This week is quite an exciting week because we're going to be talking about two of the biggest wild mammals in Britain, and that's the fox and the badger. And these two animals are really interesting, and it's really great to get to know about them. One thing with these two animals is that it helps to be able to learn how to spot their signs in the field. So this is called tracking, or looking for field signs, and it used to be used when we didn't have supermarkets, and to find their food people would have gone out and they would have had to learn how to find the footprints and the signs of these animals. Not foxes and badgers, because I think foxes and badgers would taste a little bit disgusting, but things like deer and some water birds and that kind of thing. And by learning things like how to spot their footprints, they'd be able to go out and find their dinner. And here we've got a little bit of mud that's still a bit wet, and we can start to see some evidence that there's been wildlife through here. So looking at some of these prints, you can see that there's a bit of a difference. So if you come over here, Rich, there's ones here which have got 3 toes, so 1, 2, 3, and that is likely to be a bird footprint. So that looks like there's been a bird here. So it might be something like a heron, or it might be a duck. I can't see any webbing in the toes, so that means it's probably not a duck. It's a little bit hard to tell from that one. There's some other types of footprints. So these ones here, this actually, deer footprints look a little bit similar to this, but I think this might be a sheep one because it's not, the hooves are not very long. And then there's some other footprints here as well. So you see, there's one here, and this could be a badger footprint. It's not very clear in the mud, so it is possible that it's a bit of a wobbly dog footprint, but it could be a badger footprint. It's definitely a mammal. So I've come to a churchyard near where I live, just a walk down the road, and churchyards are really good places, just like parks or any green space, bits of woodland, anything like that. They're really good places to come looking for signs of foxes or badgers. So foxes live everywhere, and actually around where we live in the countryside, it's quite hard to find them. There are foxes in the countryside, but they're much cleverer than city foxes. They're really good at hiding from people. They're actually usually feeding on things like rabbits or voles or things like that. So they have to work a bit harder, and they also have learned to run away from humans much better. If you live in a city or a town, you're much more likely to see foxes, and you probably have seen foxes already really often around where you live. And town foxes are the same species, but they behave a little bit differently, and they'll eat anything really. They'll eat old fish and chips left out, they'll eat rubbish or waste. If you don't put your bins together properly, they will manage to open the bin and get all the rubbish out. But they also eat things like fruit or vegetables. So foxes are what's called omnivores. So carnivores eat meat, herbivores eat vegetables, so they're vegetarian, and omnivores will eat both. And although in the countryside and naturally foxes will eat much more meat, they will adapt, and they will eat all sorts of different things really. So if you want to go out and look for signs of foxes, there's a couple of things you can look for. One of them is, and this is quite interesting actually, sometimes if you walk past a hole, you can notice a bit of a musty smell, and that might be because a fox is living there. As with everything, I did say before, one of my favourite topics to talk about is poo, and fox poo is really quite distinctive. I'm not suggesting picking it up, because you might get dog poo confused for fox poo, and you definitely don't want to pick up dog poo. But fox poo has got a bit of a twist on each end, and it will have fur in it. So if you think about what dogs eat, they don't eat things that are fluffy. They usually eat dog food that we've bought for them, so their poo won't have lots of fluff in it and things like that. But fox's poo will have fluff, it will have bones, it will have all sorts of things that the foxes have been eating. They'll have their cubs this time of year, and the cubs will stay with the parents all summer. Fox cubs are really cute, so I have seen fox cubs once or twice, but you'd have to be quite lucky to see fox cubs. You can see foxes in urban areas though. The best time is to go out around dusk as it's just getting dark and see if you can spot any foxes. You might also see them when you're driving around. If you're driving around late coming back from somewhere, obviously not at the moment, but in normal times you might see foxes. And foxes are found all over the place. I think my best fox sighting was when I was doing a survey right in the middle of Bristol looking for bats at a hospital, and a fox came right up and sniffed my shoe, which was amazing. And normally they don't behave like that, they're normally quite shy. But that fox obviously was used to being a proper urban fox, a proper bruiser right in the middle of Bristol, and it wasn't scared of me at all, and it gave my shoe a good sniff, realised it wasn't food, and then carried on his way. Signs of badgers are actually quite obvious when you start looking for them, but again, at the moment you probably walk past them all the time. You might be thinking, well actually I live in a town or I live in a city, I don't live in the countryside, so where am I going to go looking for badgers? You'd be really surprised actually that there's badgers in so many cities now. Even in London, there's a surprising number of badgers in London. So badgers are, like foxes, moving into cities, moving into towns, getting used to adapting to the way they live alongside people. In the countryside, badgers will eat things like earthworms, their favourite food, and they'll eat all sorts of different things. Again, like foxes, they're omnivores, so they'll eat all sorts of different food. They'll eat berries, like blackberries, they love blackberries, corn, sometimes from farmers' fields, which gets them in a bit of trouble, and they will eat things like roadkill, that kind of thing, or anything that they can get their little jaws around, really. But in cities like foxes, they're adapting to live alongside humans and even scavenging some of the waste and rubbish that we put out, things like leftover food. So if you live in an urban area, don't think that you won't have badgers. I've seen badgers right in the middle of Bristol, near parks admittedly, but right in the middle of Bristol. And the same, I know there's a badger family that live right in the middle of Bath. So it's really brilliant. So you can actually go out and see if you can spot some badger signs. You might have been walking past them all this time and just not realised. Down here you can see this hole. This is actually a badger house, and a badger house is called a set. So it's S-E-T-T, and the tunnel goes underground, and badgers' houses are amazing because they go underground and they make big tunnels and chambers, and then they sleep down there. This time of year is a really good time to go out and see if you can spot signs of badgers. You might not see a badger, but you might find evidence that they're around. So the first thing you can look for is holes like this, and you can see down here there's lots of digging where the badgers have excavated their tunnel. So they've burrowed down, and the tunnels can go back as far as 20 metres, and they've kicked all this soil out the front. And then something else you can look for is things like this. So sometimes you might even get a pile of grass, and this is bits of bedding from inside the set where the badgers are. And then down here, if you look really closely, sometimes, oh, I've got one here, you can find hairs. And badger hairs are really cool because you can see they're quite wiry, and badgers are black and white, and there's nothing else really that has hairs like this. You might find a cat hair that looks a bit like this, but badger hairs are quite long, and you can see they're quite wiry, and it's got black and white tips on the end and black in the middle, and that's a badger hair. So then you might know that badgers are here. This set is quite big, so it's got at least 20 holes all the way around, so it's probably one where badgers are having their babies. If you get just one hole, you might get a badger that's been kicked out from the main family group and has made its own set. But this is a main set, this is where they have their young. And at the moment there probably are badger cubs underground here, and they'll be coming out about this time and exploring with their mums and dads. Badgers live in big families, so there might be as many as maybe 10 badgers, maybe 20 badgers underground here because it's quite a big set. And so another little tip to see if you find a hole and you're not sure whether it's used by rabbits or by badgers, there's a little tip that you can use to find out if it's being used by badgers. And that is, get 2 sticks like this, and then you get your hole, and then really carefully you get down into it, and then you can put the sticks in a bit of a cross over the entrance, like that. And if it's a rabbit, oh, there we go, like that. And if it's a rabbit, they'll be able to find their way around the sticks. and they'll just come through the middle, and if it's a badger they'll crash straight through the sticks and break them, so you'll know whether you've got a badger or a rabbit. Because the mud is quite dry here, we don't have any good signs of footprints, unfortunately, although you can see there's worn earth where badgers have been running around, and you can actually see they make a real mess and they make lots of trails where they run. So another way of going out looking for badgers is to see if you can find any trails, any bare patches of mud that maybe go through a hedgerow or through some trees or through a fence somewhere, and you can see whether you can find any places badgers have been going. And here we're quite lucky actually, because a badger has come through here and it's got stuck, a little bit of its fluff has got stuck. So we've got a bit of badger fluff here, and you can see it's badger because, like I showed you earlier, there is a badger hair here as well with the black and the white bits. So there's all sorts of signs of badgers, and you can be a proper nature detective and see if you can find any of them around where you live. So one thing you can do around your local area is to go out and see if you can find any snuffle holes and any places that badgers might have been looking for their dinner. This is my favourite badger sign, and if you haven't guessed already, I bet you can guess that it's poo. So I found some badger poo, and badgers are quite interesting. You can tell quite a lot about them from their poo, including what they've been eating. So in the middle of summer it tends to be quite watery. This is a bit of old poo, so it probably was quite watery. It's dried out now, it looks a bit like a cow pat, but if you poke it you can see in there that's a bit of badger poo. And in the middle of summer it tends to be quite dark, so if you remember the hedgehog poo, they eat earthworms as well, and they tend to have a similar colour poo, so it's quite dark. But in the autumn they can eat a lot of berries, and you might find poo with lots of berries in. So sometimes they make poo pits like this one, called latrines, and they leave their poo in them. And badgers are really clever, they actually have territories, which means they have areas which they claim as their own, a bit like your house and your garden, and then they don't want any other badgers to get into them, and they use those areas to feed in. So this is a badger marking out where part of its territory is, or its garden, or the area that it goes and feeds in. This is a really handy piece of kit. So this is what's called a trail camera, and this is quite a good one because I use it for work, but you can actually pick these up for as little as about £50, and you can get them from Aldi sometimes, or anywhere really, and they will still take pretty decent videos and photos. So I'm going to leave this out in the place where we park our cars, out the back of our house. There's this really nice hedgerow, there's some bits of mud there that got some footprints in, and I'm going to see if anything comes along here at night, and hopefully we might get some videos on the trail camera. There's all sorts of things you can go out and see if you can spot, and I bet you around where you live, no matter where you are, you almost certainly will have either foxes or badgers, or hopefully both.